National Cabinet has been meeting this evening, and all members of that National Cabinet have reaffirmed our commitment to just how important the National Cabinet is to ensure that all governments are working closely together to put in place the various arrangements and supports to ensure the Australian people can come through this together over the very difficult months ahead. I want to thank all members for the National Cabinet for coming together this evening and to work through the many issues that have been raised, particularly over the course of the day. So I can stand here tonight with the Chief Medical Officer and provide some clarity as to a number of issues that has arisen over the course of the day. So the National Cabinet, I want to assure Australians, is working and will continue to work, and all of its members are very committed to its processes and its decisions. Secondly, the measures I'm going to take you through tonight relate to two particular areas. The first one is in relation to places of gathering, for social gathering, and I want to take you through some new rules, stage one of those rules, which Premiers and Chief Ministers will go into further detail tomorrow as they move to legislate and regulate the changes we're putting in place. The second in relation to schools, and I want to reinforce, as the Chief Medical Officer I'm sure will, that there has been no change to the advice, the health advice, in relation to schools. I said earlier today, and as the Chief Medical Officer has been stressing also at all of our presentations, social distancing, keeping the healthy distance, healthy physical distance between individuals, as you're practising here tonight, wherever that is our biggest weapon in fighting this virus, saving lives. And we need all Australians to be following the health advice when it comes to keeping a healthy distance and observing the limits that relate to gatherings, whether they be outdoor or whether they be indoor. This is incredibly important. The failure of our public to do that will put people at risk and make it extremely difficult for governments to be able to take actions that can control the flow and spread of this virus. Governments must do their bit, and we are, but we need Australians to do their bit. On the weekend, what we saw was a disregard of those social distancing practices, as people turned up to the beach in large numbers, crammed venues in our major cities. As I flagged this morning, this sent a very clear message to Premiers, Chief Ministers and myself that the social distancing practices are not being observed as well as they should be. Now, I want to thank all of those Australians who are doing the right thing, those Australians who are engaging in the self-isolation, particularly when they've come back from overseas. I want to thank them for doing that. But what I am seeking, and all the Premiers and Chief Ministers are seeking, is that Australians will do better than they have been on this and to hold each other to account. I might just ask if we don't do flashes, if that's okay, because it's a bit distracting. Thank you. So what's important is that we now need to take action, because we can't have the confidence as a group of leaders that the social distancing guidelines and rules that we have put in place won't be followed to the level of compliance that we require to flatten the curve and to slow the spread and to save lives. So the Premiers and Chief Ministers, together with myself, have tonight agreed that there is a need to move to more widespread restrictions on these gatherings in indoor spaces, and I want to run through them with you. I want to stress that this is stage one of this response. Premiers and Chief Ministers are also very clear that they want these rules to apply statewide, territory-wide, in each of their jurisdictions. They are stage one and they will be reviewed on a monthly basis. But as I have stressed, and the Chief Medical Officer has stressed, and others have also, that once you start putting these sorts of arrangements in place, we should have the expectation that they will remain in place for at least 6 months. If the health situation changes and enables us to reconsider those arrangements, then that can be reconsidered. But I wouldn't want anyone to get the impression that these arrangements are things that will be in place for a couple of weeks or a month and then will be discarded and everything will be okay. These are very significant measures, and they are done, regrettably, because it will mean for many people that the places at which they go to work, they will be unable to do that in the way they were before. And it makes it even more important, the measures I announced earlier today, to provide support to those individuals who may be affected by these changes. This is what I mean. When we all don't do the right thing, then it has real implications for others. Stage 1 would see that in enclosed spaces for gatherings in the following facilities to be closed as of midday tomorrow. Registered and licensed clubs. Licensed premises in hotels and pubs. So that is in the licensed area, not in the accommodation area, but in the venues that sit within those hotels where there are licensed gatherings and gatherings that will also be excluded, that will also be closed. Off-licence parts of those premises for bottle shops, that particularly applies in places like Tasmania and in Queensland, I understand, they will be excluded from these arrangements. They work like any other retail premises. They are not a place of people gathering in an off-licence bottle shop. Entertainment venues and cinemas, casinos and nightclubs. Restaurants and cafes will be restricted to takeaway only. Indoor sporting venues, places of worship. Enclosed spaces for funerals and things of that nature will have to follow the strict 4 square metre rule, which will be enforced. Home deliveries, takeaways, all of these things will continue, as I know many of these catering businesses are already adjusting their business models in anticipation of things that they believe would potentially take place. The fact that we're having to do that at this point, I've gone into the reasons why. And I am deeply regretful that those workers and those business owners who will be impacted by this decision will suffer the economic hardship that undoubtedly they will now have to face. That is a very, very regretful decision, but a necessary one in the view of the Premiers and Chief Ministers and myself to ensure that we can control the spread of this virus. This should highlight to all Australians how serious this is and how hard we all have to work together to get this right. In remote communities, there will be specific rules that will be defined by the Chief Ministers, Premiers in those communities, and they'll be worked through tomorrow morning. The Premiers and Chief Ministers, together with myself, will be considering Stage 2 potential restrictions in this area. But what we first want to see is we want to see the public respond to these very serious measures. We're dealing with the principal places of social gathering, where we saw people coming together on the weekend. If we don't get on top of that, then we look at a much more difficult health scenario into the future. Now, on the issue of schools, children should go to school tomorrow. There is no change to the medical expert advice in relation from the AHPPC panel, the medical expert panel from the states and territories in their advice to the National Cabinet in relation to the health advice. That said, I also want to thank all the teachers and all those working in our schools who've been doing that under a lot of pressure. The principals and the deputy principals, the teachers' aides, all of those have been working in the school communities under a lot of stress and strain as this debate has raged on. Health advice has been clear and they've remained open. And this is important because I want to stress this. I don't want to see our children lose an entire year of their education. That's what we're talking about here. This is very serious. If you're a 4-year-old child at preschool, you don't get your 4-year-old year back. You only get it once. Early childhood education is incredibly important, as is all the years of school education. And we want to ensure keeping Australia running means ensuring we can keep up to the mark with our children's education as best as we can. And where there's health advice which says you can get to school and you can be taught, then it's important that we do that for as long as possible, except where health circumstances would change that arrangement. What we will be doing, though, is allowing parents to the end of this year's school term to be able to keep their children home where they choose to. But for all of those parents who wish to send their children to school for an education at the school, those schools will remain open. In addition, schools will seek to provide learning at home in a distance learning framework, but you cannot be assured that that will come in place immediately. That will take some arrangements from those schools, particularly the public schools. In many independent and Catholic schools, they may choose to move to those models, as some already have. But what's important here is if you're a parent, you want your child to go to school up until the end of this term, then the schools should remain open and must remain open, is the instruction, until the end of that term. Now, Victoria has already taken the decision to end the term over the course of this week. Their term was due to end on Friday anyway, and they've brought that forward to Tuesday, which is actually a pupil-free day for the teachers, and I understand they'll also be working on how they will be able to deliver potential distance learning models in the future. The Premiers and Chief Ministers all have the same view, that schools should reopen on the other side of the term break, subject to the health advice at that time. Parents who make the decision for their children to remain at home must take responsibility for those children. Those children are staying at home. It's not an excuse for them to go down the shopping centre or to go and congregate somewhere else, or potentially put themselves in contact with the vulnerable and elderly population. If you choose to keep your child at home, you are responsible for the conduct and behaviour of your children. That is always the case for any parent. But particularly in this case, it is important that they observe the strict social distancing arrangements that have been advised to the public. This term break will be like none other. This won't be a holiday, as it's normally known, for the break in term. There won't be trips interstate. There won't be those holiday normal type arrangements. There won't be congregating up at the trampoline venue or whatever it happens to be. That won't be happening. It won't be a holiday as anyone has ever known it. And it's important that I think families and households understand that, because over the course of the term break, we need to ensure that we continue to follow the very strict rules around social distancing. This is a critical time, an absolutely critical time. The decisions that parents make, that we all make over the course of the next few weeks in particular, could very seriously determine the trajectory that Australia continues to go on in relation to the coronavirus. So I would seek and implore Australians to follow this advice. You will be saving lives and you'll be saving livelihoods. Already, as a result of the measures we have been forced into taking this evening, there are many livelihoods that will be impacted as a result. So they are the measures that we've arrived at tonight. It was an important discussion to have, and we've been able to come to an agreement between all of the states and territories as to how we proceed on those issues. We will meet again on Tuesday night. There are many other issues we have to discuss. The tenancies legislation is a key issue that comes up on Tuesday night, and there are many other matters that are before us. We're going to keep working together. We are absolutely committed to this process of the National Cabinet. It is a key tool for helping Australia work through the difficult challenges that we have.